Look at that. I'm nearly on time today, only 1 minute past 8. Well done, me. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest live session on Pathlight Thrive Hive. This evening we have Joanne Forristal talking to us about OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and what it's really like. Joanne has experienced that for 20 years, so she knows. And, I know a little bit about it, but I'm looking forward to learning some more about what it's really like. And also we're going to talk about Joanne's mental health journey and how she has recovered from OCD, and also how she supports other people who have had a diagnosis of OCD and had some therapy themselves. And yeah, as usual, if you have any comments or questions as we're going through, just pop them in the comments box. And if you want us to know what your name is, you can either just type your name before your comment, or you can go to that little link there. This software I use called StreamYard requires your permission to share your little Facebook photo and your Facebook name. So if you want to go there, you can do that now. It takes about 20 seconds, or you can just be anonymous to us, or type your name before you comment if you want us to know who you are. So that's that. And as usual, I'm going to invite you to share the group with your friends, family, colleagues, whoever you think would benefit from being here. You could just share a link on your Facebook page, or you can invite people in directly if you think they would, if they would like it or get something from being here. So thank you very much for all the people that have been doing that already. It's wonderful to grow this community further. Excuse me, I've just finished my tea. And finally, if you are enjoying the Hive, if you're feeling you're getting some benefit from it, then you can support what we're doing here by going to buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive. And there's two ways you can support this space. One is by becoming a member. You can subscribe for £7 a month, cheaper than Netflix, and get various benefits, which are all listed on the Buy Me a Coffee page there. Or you can just drop me £3 anytime, or any denomination of £3, anytime you've felt that you've had a benefit from the session. So if you don't want to subscribe, but this session is of particular interest to you, and you feel like you've got something from it, you want to support what we're doing here, you can just go there afterwards and send me £3, and that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, oh look, we've got a comment already. It's Jackie. Hello, Jackie. She's saying, hello, Paul and Joanne. Hello, good to have you with us. So, without further ado, let's bring Joanne in. So, welcome to Pathlight Thrive Hive, Joanne.
Thanks, Paul. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much. And thank you for being here and sharing your time and expertise with us. So, are you happy to just introduce yourself, say a little bit about you?
Yeah.
Who you are?
Yeah, my name is Joanne Forristal, and I am a coach. I'm a life coach, and I have a company called Dovestone Coaching, which is after the Dovestone Reservoir that a lot of people will know. And yeah, like you said, I've had OCD for 20 years and lived with it, and I've learned to accept it. And I still have it. I still have obsessions, compulsions, but I'm now at a stage where I manage it very well. And also, I would say that I am probably about 60% recovered. The aim would be maybe to be 80 or 90. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm at a good place at the moment.
Lovely. So I'm just going to chip in with this concept of recovery, because I suppose it's something that I teach on my mental health first aid courses, that the mental health concept of recovery is different to physical health. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, to me, recovery means different things to different people, which I'm sure you agree with. And I think a lot of people don't realise that you can have a mental illness but still have a good life. It is possible. Yeah, sometimes people are really struggling and in a bad place, but you can also have a good life as well. But yeah, to me, recovery is getting back to doing normal, things that everyday people do without having anxiety. But I know I will never completely get rid of my OCD. But yeah, that's kind of, I think 100% would be completely no OCD. But 60 is very good. I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, I suppose recovery doesn't mean zero symptoms. Yeah. It means having that diagnosis or having some symptoms, but living a good life despite those symptoms.
Despite them, yeah.
Excellent. Lovely. So, yeah, there's two questions that I ask everyone, all my special guests. So, number one is, what do you love? What are your passions?
I love reading. I love reading anything, horror, thriller, romance. To me, reading is so much better than watching films because, like, you're it's almost like you're there. And I'm a bit of a sucker for like period romance, like Jane Austen and stuff. But I'll just read anything, horror, thrillers. So yeah, having a good book and being left quietly to read it is my ideal afternoon.
Yeah. Do you see that as a kind of escape, or is it a creative stimulation sort of thing? Or?
It is definitely escapism. And it's something I'd probably do at night before going to sleep, but in a good way, you know. It's not that I use it to get rid of things, but it's something that I do on my own, which I love, you know.
Yeah, lovely. It's we can grow, I think, and we can enter new worlds.
Definitely.
Yeah, great stuff. And the other standard question is, how has this whole pandemic been for you?
For me, it's not been that bad, which a lot of people find strange with OCD. I had a lot of friends text me saying, are you okay? My OCD tends to revolve more around blood and bodily fluid illnesses that are spread through that. So things like colds, flu and COVID don't dramatically affect me. Having said that, coming out of lockdown was a bit more anxiety provoking, but I know for a lot of people with OCD, it's quite a distressing time. Even without contamination issues, the uncertainty of the whole situation really triggers the stress and obsessions, compulsions. But you see, I like being at home. I feel comfortable at home. So for me, it's not been that bad, to be honest.
So I suppose a bit like we were saying with recovery means different things to different people.
Yeah.
Also with OCD or any other mental illness, it's unique. You know, we all experience depression, anxiety, psychosis, whatever it is, differently.
Yeah. And there's lots of people think there's types of OCD. There isn't. OCD is OCD. In the OCD community, we call them themes. And that's kind of where your obsessions focus. So like contamination or harm, or they have like magical thinking OCD. So there's not actually different types, but some people won't have issues with contamination at all. You know, there's lots of different kind of themes of OCD.
Okay. So I suppose before we kind of get into more detail, it would be good for people who aren't really aware of what OCD is to give some kind of definition or whatever your understanding of OCD is, if that's okay.
Well, yeah, generally it's when a person, they experience kind of very distressing, unwanted thoughts, intrusive thoughts that they can't get rid of. And to help these cause a lot of anxiety, and to help get rid of that anxiety, they carry out rituals, which we call compulsions. And they can be mental rituals, so you wouldn't even know the person had OCD. Some people themselves don't know it's OCD. Or they can be physical, which a lot of people are more familiar with. Or a lot of people have both. And the more you try and do the compulsions to get rid of the anxiety, which is short term, in the long term, it causes the problem to get worse and worse, really.
And it can be very debilitating for certain people. Yeah.
It's very debilitating. At one point, it was counted something like in the top 10 of most debilitating conditions. That's a good few years ago. But I mean, you know, people give up their careers. There are people that even give up their families and their family life because of OCD, because they can't be around their family. It destroys relationships. It's really debilitating when it no.
So it's difficult for the person who's suffering to cope with, but I imagine it's also really difficult for the people around them, the partners, children, friends, work colleagues, possibly even.
Yeah, I mean, anybody. I mean, it is possible that someone very close to you can have OCD and you don't know about it, and that's very possible. But also, it's like you say, with any mental illness, there's the frustration of the family just wanting you to be better. There's anger, you get into arguments. I'm lucky that I have a good family that understand it, but also there's a lot of people family don't understand, unfortunately, and I think that kind of makes the problem worse, really.
So I suppose it's all about, well, partly about education. So people understanding what it is that's going on for that person, and then bringing some compassion to that. And I assume you know, the partner, family, whoever needs to be really patient as well as compassionate.
Yeah, they do. But you can see how it's so hard for them to be patient. They put up a lot. The best way I would describe it to family or friends is, don't see it as being that person, almost see it like a bully. So the OCD is bullying the person into doing the things, rather than that the person is wanting to do things. And that's how I would normally say to friends and family to view it, you know.
Yeah, so that's nice. Kind of externalizing, which is a lot of people use for anxiety and depression and other mental illnesses, to say, right, this isn't me, I'm not my diagnosis.
That's right.
This is a thing that sits on my shoulder. We might call it Bob or June or something. And, Bob's back again.
And people do have a name for it sometimes. I don't, but people do.
Mm-hmm. So are you happy to share more around your own experience of how it developed, if you're aware of how it started with you and how it manifests?
Thinking about it, I think I was always a worrier. And even as a child now, looking back, I can see that I had OCD tendencies. But it didn't start to really affect my life. I started to kind of check things were off when I turned about 15, 16. And then I kind of went to university, everything was good. And I went to work in my first job, and I felt really stressed. And then it really kicked in. And so I was about 20, really, 21, when it really kind of kicked in big style. And generally, I think it was because I felt inadequate in my job, that I didn't know what I was doing, and felt stressed. And that really kicked it off, you know.
So you said you were always a worrier, but is that the case even when you were a young child?
Yeah. I remember being a worrier as a young child, but I think I quite internalized it. I didn't really tell people, which I think, looking back now, was part of the problem. I didn't handle it well. But I mean, I was from a good background. I was, given everything I needed. I did well at school, had lots of friends. So there was no kind of one incident that really, it goes to show that it's not necessarily something that's happened in your past, although it can be post-traumatic. But, some people just biologically, environmentally can develop mental illness,
Yeah. So do you think there is a kind of genetic element to yours? Are you aware that your parents had any issues with anxiety?
Not necessarily my parents. I have suspicions around my grandma, but as you know, people didn't talk about things as much back then. And like I say, OCD can be very hidden, that you might not know people have it. So I know my grandma showed certain traits. I remember going to Ashton Market and her putting toilet roll on the toilet seat and don't sit down. And I remember all that. So she had a very high standard of kind of cleanliness. But in terms of actually having OCD, I don't know of anybody. But I do think that people with OCD tend to have certain personality traits, like they find it hard to tolerate uncertainty, and they tend to be more perfectionists. So there is certain traits in the personality that can, make you more likely to develop it.
So it is that thing of the what we call the biopsychosocial model. Yeah. So there's the biology, which is the genetics, the psycho, which is that person's psyche. They might just be wired that way to be anxious. And then the social model, so the stuff that's going on around that person, whether it's in childhood or a traumatic event or whatever. So it all plays in. And Jackie's sent a comment here. So I once read about a man in the US who had an extreme form of OCD, checking. He tried to drive to another state, but had to keep turning back and checking as he was convinced he had run someone over.
And that was it. I had OCD. I had to stop driving for about 3 years because the stress of driving got so much, and a journey that should take 20 minutes could take me an hour. And by the time I got home, I'd be so stressed about it. So yeah, that is quite common that people don't realize that's part of checking OCD. But now luckily I can drive, and I actually enjoy driving again. So that's good.
So when you were struggling with driving, if you don't mind me asking, what was it that was causing the anxiety? Was it the fear of injuring someone, or?
Yeah, a lot of my OCD revolves around either harm to myself or harm to others. With me, it's accidental harm. Some people, they worry that they're going to lose control and actually purposely hurt somebody, which is a part of what we call harm OCD. But for me, and even now, this is kind of the checking with the drive-in and kind of gas, electric. That's one still I find quite difficult, leaving the house, checking things are off. Although I'm a lot better at it, I can still find that quite stressful. So yeah, that is a fear of accidentally harming somebody else. And I think for me, it's the thought of living with a guilt that distresses me. The thought of having to live the rest of my life with some feeling of guilt is kind of worries me, you could say.
Yeah. I remember someone I met a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year actually, who went for a job interview. I think he lives in South Manchester, and the job interview was in Bolton or something like that. And he drove all the way there and then thought, oh gosh, I've left the gas on.
And I had to drive back. Yeah.
And that was like the thing. So he missed the interview, went all the way back, and the gas wasn't on. And for some people, it's locking doors, and they always think you have to lock the door several times and go back and check that it's locked.
That's right. And often you can be late for work. If you had someone coming into work constantly late and you knew they had OCD or suspected, that could be a very good reason. Making excuses. You often make excuses of why you're late and this, that, and another, because it's just too much hassle to explain it all. So yeah, that people with kind of checking OCD often are late for things. It can be difficult to get out of the house.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I've forgotten the term now. Did you say it's kind of flavors of OCD or themes? Thank you. Themes.
That's how we tend to refer to it. Yeah. Okay.
So how many different themes are there?
Oh, you could literally have OCD about anything.
Right.
Any normal activity you do in a day, and I could tell you how you can have OCD about it. Generally, there's contamination OCD. And that can be contamination to you giving something to somebody or them giving something to you, like germs, infection. But it can be quite specific. Like I said, for me, flu, if someone sneezed on me, yeah, I'd be like, ugh. But it wouldn't bother me any more than it would bother you. But if I saw something that looked like blood, that would really stress me out. And then contamination can also be contamination, picking up somebody's personality. If they had personality quirks that you thought were bad, you might become contaminated by them, and also contaminated by environmental. So you might get people that don't use antiseptic stuff because they're worried about contamination chemically. And then there's checking, like you said, driving, like I think it was Jacqueline, wasn't it? Jacqueline said about the driving, gas taps, things like that. And that's quite a lot of people can relate to those two. But there's ones like magical thinking OCD, where you feel that if you have a thought that it might come true or be more likely to be true. There's also harm OCD. That's a real big one. And that can be physical harm, mental harm to others or yourself, or even sexual harm. And that's a really distressing one because people often don't want to speak about that. They don't want to tell people that they have thoughts that they might hurt somebody. And that's often when people don't actually realize it's OCD as well. They think it's something else. I'm trying to think what else is. I mean, it's literally anything. A lot of them does revolve around having some sort of consequence to hurt people in a broad sense. And the one a lot of people don't know about is an important one to mention as well, is what we call somatic OCD. And that's when people become hyper aware of bodily functions like blinking and breathing, and all they can think about are those functions. So there is a huge range. And if anyone thought they might have OCD, if they went to one of the OCD charities in the UK, they list a whole range of kind of themes that you could have, and people would find it there, whatever it is they're looking for.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, I'm thinking of someone I know who told me the story of they went to a pub and put a song on the jukebox, which was Tsunami by the Manic Street Preachers. And then the very next day, I think it was, well, it might even have been the same day, there was that tsunami, Boxing Day tsunami in somewhere in Southeast Asia. And that person was racked with guilt because they were convinced that by putting that jukebox song on, they had killed thousands of people.
Yeah. And the thing is, the compulsions that you might feel you need to do might be completely unrelated to what, and religious OCD as well, that's another big one, but it might be completely unrelated to what the action is. It might just have to be repeating something over and over. But you're right, yeah. The funny thing is with OCD is that we know our thoughts are irrational, but we can't help doing the compulsions anyway because they cause anxiety. So it's the easier thing to do is to do the compulsions.
Yeah, okay, so we have a question from Facebook user. At what age can it start?
It's hard to know. It's like anything with a lot of these things. There are people that report that children as young as 3 and 4 start to show, but children naturally do have rituals anyway. There are children that line their teddies up and do things like that. So just because a child starts to do rituals doesn't necessarily mean it's OCD. But if it started they became very upset, like constantly, and it started to build more and more, then yeah, it's worth seeing somebody. But children very much can suffer, and it's very hard for children when they suffer because they really don't understand what's going on. It can be very distressing for parents as well. But I have heard people say as young as 3 or 4, the child with some conditions like autism, children show. And there's also a condition called PANDAS, which it's a separate condition, but the children show OCD tendencies. It's to do with a strep B infection of the throat. But the OCD is pretty much overnight that they develop it. So that's one of the signs of PANDAS, it's called.
Interesting. So I suppose a point that you made there, Joanne, around just because a child is lining up their teddies or organising their pens in colour order or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean they've got OCD.
No.
So how, for anyone who's concerned about themselves or their partner or their children, how can people identify whether it is or might be OCD and what isn't OCD?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you need a diagnosis, I pretty much diagnosed myself. I knew what was going on. But if you need a diagnosis, like anything, you need to see a doctor, psychologist or psychotherapist to diagnose you. And they do kind of, there are tests that they can, sorry, excuse me, I've just had my tea as well. So they do tests to determine if you have OCD. I think the worrying thing is a lot of people wait 5-10 years before it gets that bad that they decide they want help. So often it's at a stage when it's really bad. But yeah, with children, if you had concerns, it's a good idea to see the doctor. Like I said, with some of the more taboo, sensitive topics around harm that people are worried they're going to harm the children, they're scared to go to the doctor. And there are some very good OCD UK charities that can help them do that. So it would always be good to seek advice off them. If you thought that, you had these worries about hurting children or anything like that, they're a good place to start anyway.
Yeah. So as like you say, with any mental health concern, always go and seek professional help, and if possible, the earlier the better, because it may develop.
This is it. Yeah. And if for some reason you were worried about the reaction of the doctor, even print something out about, if you go to websites and search, you'll find information, and take it into them and say, I think this is what I've got. And then it explains it a little bit better rather than you trying to explain it in your own terms and struggling,
Yeah. Thank you. And Jackie said that Jackie's a psychotherapist. She said she's often paralysed by fear that if they left the house, another symptom would develop, which can develop into an extra obsession. Is that something that you're familiar with as well?
I'm fairly good now at recognising that if I'm developing a new theme and I can nip it in the bud. The ones I struggle with is the ones I've had for years. But yeah, some people worry that they're going to develop new obsessions. So they'll be kind of microanalyzing everything they do. And some people also worry that they're going to develop other mental illnesses, so that, like psychosis and things like that. So yeah, with OCD, like I said, you can literally obsess about anything, really.
So it could get into a really negative spiral of overthinking and analysing everything. And if I do this might happen, so I better not do that. And it just becomes more and more debilitating, I imagine.
Yeah, and like some people, luckily I'm not like this anymore, but I remember once saying to my husband, like when I do Zumba, I said it's 1 hour where I have a break from my brain. And I remember him saying to me at the time, what, do you really think about stuff all the time? And I said, yeah, you know, sometimes I just want a holiday from my own brain. And that's really hard when you're constantly going over thoughts in your head again and again. And I'm lucky now that I've kind of broken away from that. But yeah, that it can be very hard like that.
It sounds exhausting. I like that phrase, having a holiday from your own brain, but if it's just constantly on.
Yeah. I think that's the case with a lot of mental illnesses. People don't realize how exhausting and tiring. You know, when we say we're tired, we don't mean we're just physically tired. We mean, you know, absolutely exhausted. And it takes a lot of energy to keep going. You know, it does.
Do you know, is there anything that shows up on an MRI scan that's different to a person who does not have OCD in their brain?
Yeah, there are evidence that shows as well, like you said, biological, that brain structure in people with OCD can be different. What's interesting is that they've done brain scans of people before and after therapy that have made progress in recovery. I won't pretend to you that I can remember all the different areas of the brain, but they have shown that certain chemicals have reduced when they've had therapy. So I think it's a lot of these things. I mean, you ask experts in the area and even nobody can quite agree. And I think this is the case with a lot of mental illnesses, what causes one condition. There's lots of like chemical theories, brain structure theories, and we don't really know. But yet there is evidence to show. And some people can develop OCD after a head injury. That can be common as well. I actually have epilepsy as well. So I kind of wonder whether that has an influence with it. Although it's fully controlled now, but maybe my brain does just work differently. You know?
Yeah, we're all unique, aren't we? So,
it's a bit.
Yeah. Okay, so are you happy to share more around your own personal experience of you talked about contamination. So how was that difficult for you? What restrictions did that place on you?
Contamination is still my most difficult because it affects lots of things I do. It affects where I go in terms of having to use public toilets. I won't go into too much detail, but it affects what I do during my time of the month, you could say. So it's very restricted that way, and where I go and what I do and holidays. Sometimes it affects who I'm around. If I have someone who I consider contaminated, and I don't mean that they're dirty, it might be that they've come into contact with somebody that, or something that I would consider, like if they mentioned to me that they had asbestos in the house, I would then be like, oh, wanting to keep away from them. So I've forgotten what the question was. Oh yeah, my only personal experience. So at one stage, I used to worry that I was going to give something to somebody else, like contaminate other people. Now, once I had my child, it was funny. It literally switched overnight to me and my children becoming contaminated. And also I kind of get quite, I have quite a lot of obsessions around like animal, like dog poo and stuff like that. But that again is getting better. And my niece has just bought a dog and he's going to be my exposure dog. I'm going to have to go and pick up his poo. So that'll be quite a good exposure for me. And so, yeah, but contamination, it affects what jobs I do. I can't work in catering or cleaning or any job that might involve kind of dealing with people too closely. I wouldn't like to work with children, animals. So it limits. That is part of the reason I gave up. I used to be a podiatrist. That was my career. And a lot of people laugh at that because you're dealing with blood and stuff like that. But that in the end is why I had to leave that job. So yeah, so I mean, it ruined my career in a way, contamination OCD.
But now you have a new career, which we'll come on to later. Yeah. Okay, so you've kind of touched on recovery there, and we said earlier that you're kind of 60% recovered and you'd like to get to 80%. So are you happy to share what has worked for you? How have you recovered?
Yeah, well, I underwent cognitive behavioral therapy years ago. And although it helped at the time, I kind of went backwards then. And I think it's because I didn't really want to do it. I was kind of being pushed into it. And then when I had when I was going to have my second child, I thought, right, it gave me new motivation to go and get it this time. And I did it on the NHS. I had 6 sessions. But I think because motivation is the wrong word, because I really, really kind of was prepared to kind of feel the anxiety this time and stick with it for the sake of my children, then I managed to do the exposures more, you could say. So cognitive behavioral therapy is considered at the moment the best type of therapy by, scientists for OCD, but some people struggle with it a little bit because it does involve exposing yourself to your anxiety. But it can be done in an easier way than people feel. And now something I've started to practice is acceptance commitment therapy, which works alongside cognitive behavioral really well. And it's definitely, if someone's got OCD, I would definitely advise them to look into acceptance commitment. You can see a lot online about it. And that has been pretty much life-changing for me, more so than the CBT. And I started, doing a bit of a diary and things like that, which helped. So, yeah, but it's not easy therapy, but it is definitely worthwhile. And I think it's important to let people know that it does get better. Although it's bad at the time and it feels like you're going backwards, it does start to get better, and it's definitely worth it.
Okay, so the CBT element, is that the same as CBT that's used for other mental health issues, where it's about, okay, these are your thoughts, what evidence do you have that they're true, and you don't have to believe them, and there's these alternative realities that you can tune into?
It's kind of how your emotions, your thinking and your behavior is linked. And I didn't do a lot of that with a therapist because I kind of knew it already. But a good therapist will help you enter into an exposure plan. Exposure is really the way to get better, is to do exposure. But a lot of people are scared of it. But it's important to know that you can take easy steps and not just suddenly expose you. It doesn't mean you're going to expose yourself to your worst fears. You do it in gradual steps, and a good therapist will help you do that. So it's manageable.
Yeah, so kind of pushing you slowly and gently out of your comfort zone bit by bit.
Well, I'm a big believer that the person has to be in control of it. We call it setting up a hierarchy of exposures, where you start off with the easier ones and work up. But I think when you manage to get on top of one compulsion or obsession, it really motivates you to do others then. So it's definitely worthwhile doing, definitely.
Great stuff. And are you happy to say a bit more about the acceptance and commitment therapy, Joanne?
Yeah. Well, acceptance and commitment kind of changed my thinking about my OCD. I got to a point where one day, there were a couple of things coincided around the same time, but I kind of thought, you know what? I'm 35. I might have OCD now for the rest of my life. And I just kind of, in a way, it could have made me feel quite upset. But I kind of just went, do you know what? I've got it. Instead of waiting to kind of get better from it to do things, I just need to start doing them. And that's what I did. And unknowingly, I'd kind of already got the basis for acceptance, in that I accepted my OCD. Acceptance commitment is about, acceptance can be a bit of a misleading word. People think it's giving in, but it's not. It's about being willing to feel your emotions, and instead of trying to push them away and get rid of them, actually feel them, and then take actions towards your values, the things that are important to you, and your value-based goals. And it's been really kind of insightful for me, realizing that it's okay to feel bad and it's okay to feel anxious. And a lot of it uses kind of mindfulness techniques as well, which is something I wasn't into at all. But it's not meditation, it's mindfulness, and it helps you just kind of get a little bit of space from the thoughts that you're having, so you can take the action that you want to. But it works really well when doing exposures.
Yeah, I can see how that would play in quite nicely with the CBT, because it can work hand in hand there. So the acceptance part, as you say, is around not pushing the experience away, not pushing the emotions, the feelings away, just embracing it and saying, okay, this is my reality. I'm going to work with it.
Being willing to feel it, and to sit with it, really. Yeah.
And then is the commitment part, is that to do with committing to achieving your life goals in spite of the diagnosis?
Yeah, so we use something called the matrix, which sounds very the matrix, but yeah, it's about committing to the behavior that will bring you closer to your values. And any OCD compulsion and behavior doesn't bring you closer to that. It's always moving away from your values. So it's about, like you mentioned, going to the places you've been avoiding because you want to go there. You want to go to a music festival. You want to go to a concert. And it's about doing it despite the way you feel.
Excellent. So again, maybe just pushing yourself slowly and gently out of your comfort zone to bigger concerts, or starting at the back and then getting in the mosh pit.
Yeah, definitely.
Great stuff. And you mentioned the matrix, so I'm thinking of the red pill and the blue pill, and that got me thinking, I wonder if is the medication ever part of the solution here or not?
I've never been able to I've been offered medication, but I was told that it might affect my epilepsy. And so I made the decision not to go on medication. So it is possible just to use therapy and get better. But I'm a believer that, if the medication works for you and you're doing well on it, take it. Always do it with a doctor's advice. And if you're coming off it, do it along with a doctor. But I don't think people should feel ashamed to take medication. It's not that if you had diabetes, you would take the medication given to you. So therefore, if it's all biology and the medication helps you, then I don't think people should feel embarrassed or ashamed about taking it. I know for some people it works, for other people it doesn't. Some people have side effects. And like anything, it can take a while to find the right medication. But, you can do it without as well.
Great, thank you. So moving on to your new career, so no longer a podiatrist with all the toe jam and all the stuff that involves. So would you like to say a bit about what you do, how you support people now, Joanne?
So I'm a life coach now, and I work with people, I use acceptance commitment, but in a coaching environment. So I work with people non-clinical, so not people that have mental illnesses, because I'm not a therapist, but people, and everybody does have intrusive thoughts like, I'm not confident enough, I don't have the time, I can't do it. So I help them respond more effectively using acceptance commitment techniques to those thoughts and feelings so they can set goals towards their values. Having said that, I will work with people with OCD, but I kind of make the condition that they need to have had therapy before, understand their OCD, making progress in recovery. And then when they're at the point to set their life goals, like going to a career or going on a trip or something like that, then I work with them to do that. So I don't concentrate on treating their OCD. I'm helping them with their life goals. But because I understand OCD, they find the process with me easier than somebody who doesn't.
Yeah, so I suppose your personal experience, both of OCD, but also a great advocate for acceptance and commitment therapy. You've got those going hand in hand, which will, I imagine, allow you to relate to your clients better.
Yeah, which is quite different because a lot of coaches are kind of do the positive thinking thing, and I don't do that because that kind of goes the opposite way to acceptance and commitment. And that's not saying that can't work. In some contexts, for me, it's brilliant. I use it, but in others, it doesn't. And I think this is the important thing about therapies and techniques and tools is there's no one thing that, and I think even psychotherapists and psychologists and scientists, they get very defensive of their own methods, but different things work for different people. And I think we've got to try different things,
Yeah, horses for courses, and sometimes it is about finding that combination of different therapies, whether it's exposure therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy or the medication or whatever it is, and sometimes maybe a different therapist or different support may be required. Yeah. So do people get referred to you, or do you just kind of go out and advertise yourself? How does it work?
People tend to find me online. Unfortunately, since lockdown, I've not been able to, I try to write articles, do videos. I have a YouTube channel that I've recently started, and I want to start it's called the OCD Optimist. And I want to start doing exposure videos on there. This is why I have my cousin's dog, who's called Eric, and he's going to be Eric the Exposure Dog. And I'm going to try and do them live videos of picking up his poo. So that'll be exciting. But yeah, so people find me through things like videos, articles, or they'll search online. A lot of people that come to me do have OCD, and I turn up a lot of people, I have to say, I think you need to see a therapist. Probably about 80% of people that ring me, I actually help them find another intervention because they want to treat their OCD. But I always make sure that they're going away with a plan to contact somebody. So yeah, a lot of people that contact me do have OCD, but I work with people that don't as well.
Yeah, so just anyone who's having those intrusive thoughts, which is holding them back.
Yeah, and sometimes they're not having thoughts. It's just that they're at a sticking point and they just want to help moving over, or just maybe to create ideas. If it's a business, they want to create more ideas, or find a focus or a clarity, that they've got so many ideas, they don't know where to go, and they need to make a focus. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's the beauty of having a third party, whether it is a coach, a counsellor, a life coach, or some kind of therapist, psychotherapist, whatever it is, to offer that mirror to the person, but also to offer some focus and clarity and untangle. There's a nice kind of meme, I suppose it is, I've seen online, where there's somebody sat on a sofa with all this tangled wool in their head. And then the person that's working with them, the therapist, is just kind of untangled it all. Say, okay, so there's these 3 strands here, 3 different colours. Let's take a look at them one at a time.
I mean, the major thing with coaching is, like you say, is creating awareness. And I love it when I ask, because as a coach, all I do is ask questions, really. That's all I do at the end of the day. You don't advise people, you don't suggest. It's all about the coming from them. And I love it when a client says to me, oh, that's a good question, because then you're really getting to the depths of something. So
yeah, so you're facilitating a space for them really to come to their own answers.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
great stuff. Lovely. So so I'm going to put this banner up so people can find you at dovestonecoaching.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
and your YouTube channel again, Joanne?
It's called The OCD Optimist. But I've only got like 2 videos at the moment, but I will be doing some more.
Yeah, so. Eric the exposure dog. Right?
I'm dreading
it. I think stuff like that can be great because it's real. People are you're showing yourself, you're showing your vulnerability, and actually it can be really empowering for people to say, okay, this is a real person who has some issues that they're struggling with, and they're putting themselves through it, so they can be inspired by you doing that and say, well, if it works for that person, it could work for me as well.
And there will be a bit of humour in, because I do laugh about it a little bit, not always, but there will be a bit of humour. And Eric's very cute. He's a sausage dog. He's very cute.
Oh, the best dogs. So talking about humour, that's reminded me that I wanted to talk a little bit about people who have a bit of a chuckle around OCD, and I do like the way that you bring humour to your own condition. You're able to laugh about it, but it is, like we said, it can be really serious and very debilitating for people with that diagnosis. And there are a lot of people who go around saying, I'm a bit OCD, and actually they're not, they're just quite tidy people.
Particular, I have a lot of people saying, oh, you could come and clean my house, which, if they really understood OCD, they would know you would never go in and clean someone's house if you have contamination OCD. I kind of take it as an opportunity to educate people, to say, look, that's not what it's like. I have to say, sometimes I just let it go because I don't want to get into the conversation. But most of the time I use it as an opportunity to educate people. But some people do get upset by it. But again, sometimes I think people say it because they don't know what to say. And they want to kind of relate to you. So they think, that's, some people I think get quite frightened when you say, oh yeah, I've got a mental illness, and I'm the kind of person I tell everybody. So but people are like, oh, so they do have to fill the space and they say something. But it is, when it's used a lot, it can be quite distressing for people with OCD. I've even seen somewhere where there was a job advertised wanting somebody who was OCD about cleaning, and that, is just wrong on so many levels. I find it most annoying when companies call themselves like obsessive compulsive cleaners, or they use OCD as like almost like a benefit to the company. That really kind of that's what really gets on my nerves. And then the other thing that can kind of get on our nerves is when people say, oh, why don't you just stop? Or, oh, stop worrying. And it kind of trivializes the condition that, you know, you should have control over your thoughts, that you should just be able to stop. And it's almost like saying that you have a weakness of character. I find that quite frustrating. So yeah, I think people just need to realize that it's not a condition that is funny, really. Admittedly, sometimes you can do things that, you know, some people may consider a bit funny, but it's, at the end of the day, it's a very distressing anxiety condition. So it's not something to joke at to people that have OCD, you know.
Yeah, so like I say, it's nice that you are able to bring that humour and you can laugh at yourself.
I wouldn't laugh at somebody else because
absolutely,
very distressed. But yeah, that's because I'm at a good place at the moment. If you'd asked me that 10 years ago, no, there would have been no laughing, you know. So
yeah, so I suppose it's like you say, it is about raising awareness, and there's probably a lot of myths, a lot of misconceptions, a lot of ignorance around OCD, and the work that you're doing, and hopefully talks like this will be useful to raise that awareness and make people realize, okay, yeah, this is a serious thing. Actually, I haven't got OCD.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is changing, because I was speaking to a mental health first aid trainer, and her partner had said to her, oh, and she actually said to him, no, you know, she was able, and I think a lot of this mental health first aid training is kind of getting rid of some of the stigmas, which is really good.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I think we've got one or two more questions. So Jackie, I think we touched on this earlier, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, Joanne, about what initial traumas may trigger OCD in people.
Like I say, for me, there really wasn't anything. There was nothing I did. You know, there was no bereavement when I was younger. I never had any abuse. I grew up in a good family. I had a good education. I was never bullied, never took drugs or anything like that. So for me, I think it's purely biological and just not being able to tolerate stress. But there are cases, you know, a lot of people that I speak to and hear on forums have gone through abuse, mentally, physically, have had things that have happened in their childhood, which can, their OCD, the compulsions become, like any condition, it becomes a result, a coping strategy almost to deal with the anxiety. Like many other mental illnesses, it can come from that. And like I mentioned, there is the condition PANDAS, which means children can develop OCD, along with other conditions due to a strep B infection, but it's very rare, so it's not something to panic about. But head injuries, anything that affects the brain structure can trigger OCD as well. But it's like anything, there's a lot we don't know about the brain and about mental illness in general, so it's still undecided, really.
Yeah, it's the brain, you know, I'm continually astonished by all the new research and all the things that we're learning about the brain, and it is probably a massive mystery, you know, a large percentage of it. It's so much that happens in the mind, if not the brain, that we are probably still going to be learning about it in many years' time, I would guess.
Yeah. And probably in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, everything that we do now will be old news and we'll be doing other things. So yeah, it's always developing, which is good.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything else that you feel would be good to talk about? Anything we've not covered?
I mentioned to you I'm doing a webinar in October. It's called Do It Despite. The tickets are on Eventbrite now. Eventbrite, and that's, again, it's working along the lines of acceptance commitment, so helping people. It's not addressing mental illness, but you know, people with mental illnesses still might get something from it as an introduction to acceptance. But it's about helping people set and achieve goals despite having a lack of confidence or the thoughts that they're having. And I mentioned to you earlier, Paul, that, you know, I'm doing a discount for the group where they can get the ticket. It's a half-day workshop, and they'll be able to get the ticket for £19. And they just need to put in the code discount50 on Eventbrite, and they'll be able to get that ticket for £19, which is for like
Yeah, thank you very much for offering the group that discount. So if you'd be happy to, once we've finished the recording, if you could perhaps either just do a post on the group with a link to the Eventbrite event and the code, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Smashing. Okay, great. So anything else that you feel will be useful to bring?
No, we've covered it all, haven't we? I just just to emphasize that, for people that have OCD, to know that, you can lead a good life. There is help out there. It's not all doom and gloom. So, it is worth persisting with therapy for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. That message of hope, message of recovery, and whatever that recovery looks like, it might be very individual. It's not necessarily going to be in 0 symptoms, but you are a really good shining example of someone who's made a big recovery, and you're still working towards even further recovery, and you're helping others to do the same. So
yes, definitely.
Great stuff. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time and your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you very much.
See if we've got any more questions. No, but we've got a lovely bit of feedback there. All very interesting and informative. Thank you. And a flower. That's a sunflower. Marvellous. Excellent. So thank you, Joanne. Thank you, audience, for your interactions, and hopefully you found that useful. That's it. I'll remove you from the studio now, Joanne. If you want to hang around for a debrief, you can do. Otherwise, I can just message you later. But thank you again for your time.
Lovely. Thanks, Tom.
Take care. Bye. Great. So thank you, folks. Hopefully you found that useful, and a bit of myth busting as well into the bargain. So lots of people maybe who might be saying, I'm a little bit OCD, or my partner's a bit OCD. Maybe you'll be thinking twice about that now. As usual, just a quick reminder, if you wouldn't mind sharing the group or inviting people in, if you think they would find it useful, that would be marvellous. And if you would like to donate £3, if you found that session useful, please go to buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive. You can buy me 1 or 3 or 5 coffees, only odd numbers. It's not because I'm OCD, it's just because that's what the website allows you. Or you can subscribe for £7 a month and get various discounts and stuff. And finally, what's the other thing I was going to say? Yes, so tomorrow, there's no Man Tuesday tomorrow. Sorry, folks. I am away. So no Man Tuesday tomorrow, but we will be back next week. Wednesday, we have got the search for meaning at 8 o'clock on the Hive. Karen will be back. Lots of people gave lots of lovely positive feedback on the first session that Karen did last week. So come along for that one if you like. Nothing doing on Thursday, and then Friday, Jaffa and Steve are back with their tools for living your life. Book club on Saturday. Singer-size on Sunday is going ahead, but it's going to be a recorded session because Becky and Andy are going on holiday as well. So they're going to record the session, put it on the Hive there, and you will be able to sing along to your heart's content without anyone else seeing you or hearing you in your own time. So I highly recommend that. The first session yesterday was great. I loved it. It was really uplifting and wonderful songs as well. So get on that, and then I will be back. When will it be? I think it will be a week tomorrow for Man Tuesday. So in the meantime, thank you, Jackie. In the meantime, do catch up with Joanne at Dovestone Coaching and enjoy yourselves. And if you are having a holiday or a break of any description, go well, enjoy yourselves. Okay, take care. See you soon. Thanks for being here. Bye.